You know, when you picture the ultimate creator of the modern pirate adventure or the mind that penned the definitive psychological horror of a dual identity, you probably imagine someone who lived an incredibly rugged, swashbuckling life.
Oh, for sure. You expect the author's physical life to match the adrenaline of their work, right?
Exactly, like a guy swinging from the rigging, or at least wandering the foggy, dangerous streets of Victorian London at midnight.
Yeah.
But exactly the opposite is true here.
Yeah, the reality completely shatters that image.
It really does. The man who single-handedly gave us the treasure map, the peg-lated pirate, and the terrifying potion of Dr. Jekyll spent the vast majority of his life as a frail, bedridden invalid.
Which is wild.
Right. He was born into a family that built literal physical lighthouses out of Scottish granite, but instead he ended up building literary empires from his mattress.
It remains one of the most compelling paradoxes in literary history, I think. His spirit was constantly writing checks that his body could rarely cash.
That is a great way to put it. So, welcome to our deep dive into the life and legacy of Robert Louis Stevenson. Our mission today is to take the sources we've gathered, a comprehensive biographical look at his life, and peel back the covers of Treasure Island and Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, we want to look past the myths.
Exactly. We want to show you the global wanderer, the fierce political agitator, and the master of human psychology whose legacy was incredibly almost erased by 20th century literary snobs.
And to really understand Stevenson, or Louis as his friends called him, we have to start with the foundation he was born into in 1850 in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Right, the very beginning.
Yeah, right from the start, he inherited a severe legacy of bronchial illness from his mother's side. His family was constantly seeking out warmer climates just so the child could breathe.
That physical frailty is such a brutal contrast to his father's side of the family, though.
Oh, a total night and day difference.
Right.
His father, Thomas, his grandfather, Robert, his uncles, they were the legendary Stevenson lighthouse engineers.
Building these massive structures.
Exactly. They were out taming the freezing, brutal Scottish coastal waters, pouring concrete into violent sea storms. And here is young Louis, too sick to even attend school regularly.
Just spending winters trapped indoors, fighting fevers and coughing fits.
Right. And the person looking after him during those long stretches in bed is this really fascinating figure. His nurse, Alison Cunningham, who he called Cummy.
Cummy, it's such a sweet nickname, but she had a pretty intense impact on him, didn't she?
Oh, Cummy is crucial to understanding his psychological development. The Stevenson household was Presbyterian, but relatively moderate for the time. Cummy, however, was intensely, fervently religious.
Like fire and brimstone kind of stuff.
Very much so. She cared for him tenderly, reading to him through his fevers. But her particular mix of Calvinist doctrine and local Scottish folk beliefs gave the young boy absolutely terrifying nightmares.
Wait, I'm trying to map this out psychologically. You have a sick, feverish kid trapped in bed, and his primary caregiver is pumping his head full of terrifying religious tales of demons and hellfire.
In Covenanters, yeah.
That sounds deeply traumatizing.
It was. But it was also the exact mechanism that triggered his precocious imagination. Cummy instilled in him a profound sense of the invisible world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this idea of spiritual warfare happening just beneath the surface of polite society.
Oh, that makes total sense when you think about his later work. The idea of original sin constantly warring with respectable outward behavior. That is the exact blueprint for Dr. Jekyll's potion.
Exactly. It's the Calvinist divide made literal.
And he eventually dedicated his famous poetry collection, A Child's Garden of Verses, to Cummy, right? He called her the angel of my infant life.
He did, so he clearly recognized the gift she gave him, even if it came wrapped in nightmares. He saw the value in that duality.
The cold, hard engineering logic of his father versus the feverish, terrifying world of his nurse.
Right. It set the stage for a lifelong internal conflict.
And that conflict leads to his first massive turning point, doesn't it? As he gets older, there is this immense, crushing expectation that he's going to join the family business.
Which is impossible. A boy who is coughing up blood isn't built to survive inspecting seawalls in the freezing Atlantic.
But he tried.
He did attempt it.
Yeah.
He went on the family inspection tours during his university holidays. But he wasn't looking at the load-bearing stress of the engineering.
What was he looking at?
He was looking at the ways, the idiosyncratic locals, the sheer drama of the sea. He was gathering material for stories, not schematics.
He was essentially building lighthouses of the imagination instead.
That's a good way to frame it.
Like, His family built stone towers to guide ships safely to the mundane shores of commerce, but Stevenson wanted to build stories that guided readers away from Victorian reality and out into the wild, open ocean.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, how does a devout, wealthy 19th century engineering family react when their only son declares he's abandoning the dynasty to be a bohemian writer?
Oh, the fallout was explosive. To appease his father, Louis agreed to study law so he would have a respectable backup profession.
Did he actually do it?
He actually qualified for the Scottish bar, but he never practiced a single day.
Of course not.
Instead, he took to wearing velvet jackets, growing his hair long, and wandering the cheap pubs and brothels of Edinburgh on his strict allowance.
The ultimate teenage rebellion, just dressed in Victorian velvet.
It went far deeper than aesthetic rebellion, though. He completely rejected their core belief system.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sources highlight a truly heartbreaking moment in 1873. His father found the constitution of a secret club Stevenson and his cousin had formed.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the preamble began with a devastating sentence. Disregard everything our parents have taught us.
Oh, man. You do not want your stern Victorian father finding that document.
Definitely not. His father confronted him immediately, and Stevenson didn't back down. He admitted he was an atheist and didn't want to live his life as a falsehood.
That must have crushed his dad.
His father was devastated, telling Louis he had rendered his whole life a failure. Louis actually wrote to a friend about the agony of damning the happiness of the only two people who truly cared about him.
That takes a profound toll. Now, looking at the sources, it's clear his atheism was a temporary rebellion, like a necessary breaking away.
Right. He eventually reconciled his views. He wrote later of a manifest God for those who care to look, and he even taught Sunday school later in life.
Right. But in his 20s, he needed to completely detonate his family's world to clear space for his own identity.
And that detonation left a huge vacuum in his life. He was adrift, alienated from his family, searching for something entirely his own.
And into that vacuum walked Fanny Osborne.
Yes, Fanny.
She is the absolute antithesis of everything an Edinburgh family would want for their son. I mean, she's an American. She's 10 years older than Louis. She's an aspiring artist. She carries a pistol.
A pistol, yeah.
And crucially, she is married with children.
Separated from her philandering husband, but legally married, yes. They meet in an artist colony in France, and Stevenson is completely captivated.
She must have seemed so exotic to him.
She represented the freedom, the ruggedness, and the unvarnished reality that he was desperate to experience. They fall deeply in love. But she eventually has to return to California to sort out her marriage.
And this is where Stevenson's spirit completely overrides any logical concern for his physical body.
Totally.
Against the frantic advice of literally all his friends, and without telling his parents, he decides to follow her across the globe.
Which was incredibly dangerous for him.
He takes a second-class passage on a steamship, partly to save money, partly because he wanted the raw experience of traveling with immigrants, and then takes a grueling cross-country train from New York to California.
It sounds incredibly romantic, a grand gesture. But the physical reality of that journey was catastrophic.
It nearly killed him, right?
It did. The brutal conditions of the immigrant train completely broke his fragile respiratory system. By the time he reached Monterey, California, he was delirious and near death.
Wow.
He survived only because local rangers found him and nursed him. He was also kept afloat by a local French restaurant owner named Jules Simoneau.
Oh, I love the Jules Simoneau detail from the sources.
It's a great story.
Years later, when Stevenson was internationally famous, he sent Simoneau a signed copy of Jekyll and Hyde with an inscription saying it would be a stranger case still if he ever forgot him.
It shows that Stevenson never forgot the people who patched him back together when he was a starving romantic.
His loyalty was fierce. So what happens after Monterey?
He pushes on to San Francisco, living on 45 cents a day, and his health collapses entirely again. Stevenson wrote during this time that his spirit was in a divine frenzy.
A divine frenzy.
Yeah, constantly kicking and spurring his vile body forward. He viewed his body as a stubborn mule that his artistic ambition had to whip into submission.
And then Fanny steps in.
Right. Fanny, who is now divorced, comes to his bedside and essentially saves his life. They marry in 1880.
And because a luxury resort is out of the question, they spend their honeymoon squatting in an abandoned silver mine on Mount St. Helena.
It was a true testament to their shared eccentricities. But eventually, the harsh realities of his health forced them back to Britain.
How did his parents take that?
His parents, surprisingly, welcomed Fanny into the family. They were charmed by her wit and just grateful she kept their son alive.
But Britain isn't exactly great for his lungs.
No, the damp British weather takes its inevitable toll. His lungs fail again, forcing him to settle in a coastal town called Bournemouth, in a house he names SkerryvoreHis.
And this era is the peak of his physical confinement. He actually described himself in a letter as living like a weevil in a biscuit.
Like a weevil in a biscuit. It's such a visceral, claustrophobic image.
It really is. But I'm struggling to reconcile this part of his life. He's stuck in bed, coughing up blood in a seaside town, yet he's writing Treasure Island.
I know, it seems contradictory.
I mean, I'd be writing depressing poetry, not high-seas adventures. How is that psychologically possible?
He was using his imagination as a pressure valve. The sicker his physical body got, the more aggressive, expansive, and swashbuckling his fictional worlds became to compensate.
Wow. So the confinement fueled the adventure.
Exactly. That physical confinement at Skerryvore was the pressure cooker that triggered his most explosive era of imaginative freedom.
That's incredible.
In just 3 years, mostly from his bed, he wrote Treasure Island, Kidnapped, and Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
That is a staggering creative output for a healthy person, let alone a dying one.
It's astonishing. And the sources detail a fascinating philosophical debate he was having at the time that explains why he wrote the way he did.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Treasure Island is widely credited with liberating children's literature from the heavy chains of Victorian didacticism.
Right, because before Stevenson, books for kids were basically moral instruction manuals disguised as stories.
Exactly. But Stevenson just wanted to thrill his readers. He wasn't trying to preach. He was trying to entertain.
And he defended the stance fiercely against the literary trends of the time, didn't he?
He did. The French realists were dominating literature, and Stevenson engaged in a famous published debate with his friend, the brilliant novelist Henry James.
Oh, Henry James.
Yeah. James believed novels should compete with life, capturing all its mundane psychological minutiae.
James wanted literature to be a mirror reflecting reality.
Exactly. But Stevenson argued that life is already, quote, monstrous, infinite, illogical, abrupt, and poignant.
So why duplicate it?
Right. He felt a novel shouldn't just mimic the dazzle and confusion of reality. For Stevenson, whose actual reality was chaotic, painful, and out of his control, art was an abstraction.
It should provide a harmonious pattern, a deliberate escape from the chaos of existing.
Precisely. Because his illness made his daily life a grueling marathon of suffering, he created fiction where the adventure was neat, the stakes were clear, and the plot ultimately resolved.
That makes so much sense. But the sources show that this fierce individualism in his literature mirrored a highly complex political worldview.
Oh, his politics are incredibly difficult to pin down to one ideology.
Yeah, looking at the historical viewpoints impartially, it's wild how modern political groups fight over him. We want to be clear that we're just reporting what the historians say here, but you've got some critics arguing Treasure Island and Kidnapped are ruthless social Darwinist texts.
Right. They point out that these stories often feature a highly self-reliant individual battling a lower-class rabble in a brutal zero-sum game for wealth or survival.
But then libertarians have strongly claimed him as well.
They do. They cite his 1887 essay, The Day After Tomorrow. In it, Stevenson warned against the growing wave of social legislation in Britain.
He was worried about state overreach.
He worried that citizens were becoming socialists without knowing it. He predicted a grim future where society might look like our ant heap than any previous human polity, with government inspectors darkening the face of England and crushing individual liberty.
But framing him purely as a conservative individualist ignores the massive evolution he went through later in life. He wasn't a rigid ideologue.
No, not at all. He was a thinker constantly reacting to the realities he was witnessing. And the defining shift happens when he finally leaves Europe for good.
Seeking health and an escape from the literary establishment.
Right. He charters a yacht, sails the South Pacific, and eventually buys 300 acres in Samoa.
It's just an incredible image. Here is a 39-year-old Scottish author, a former invalid, suddenly carving out an estate in the deep Pacific.
It's like a novel itself.
He takes the native name Tusitala, which translates to teller of tales. He embeds himself in the local culture. It sounds like he finally found his pirate island in real life.
It's a beautiful image, but his time in Samoa was not a retreat into fantasy. Paradoxically, finding physical freedom on this island anchored him to heavy, real-world political realities.
Immersing himself in Samoan culture triggered a massive political awakening for him.
It did. He watched as the imperial interests of Germany, America, and Britain carved up the islands, and he transforms into an open agitator.
He defends the Samoan chiefs against these foreign powers, firing off furious letters to the Times in London to expose European misconduct and corruption.
He actually feared he might be deported by the colonial authorities for causing so much trouble.
And this political awakening completely changed his fiction.
It really did. He pivoted to a much darker realism. He wrote stories like The Beach of Faleza and The Ebb Tide.
So no more romantic pirates.
No. The villains in these late stories were no longer romantic, peg-legged pirates burying gold. The villains were duplicitous, greedy white colonizers exploiting indigenous populations.
So the clear moral lines of Jekyll and Hyde, where good and evil are neatly separated by a chemical potion, completely blur in his late work.
He realized that the indigenous clan society of Samoa, which deeply reminded him of the Scottish Highlands of his ancestors, was completely unprepared for the ruthlessness of modern foreign monopolies.
He saw the writing on the wall.
He gave passionate speeches begging the Samoan chiefs to occupy and cultivate their land, warning them that if they didn't, the foreigners would cast them out into the darkness.
It's tragic reading that history because he was entirely right. Just 5 years after his death, Samoa was officially partitioned between Germany and the United States.
He saw the destruction of a society coming and tried to use his pen as a shield to stop it. And he was doing all of this while writing a novel called Weir of Hermiston.
Returning to his Scottish roots.
Exactly. He felt it was the absolute masterpiece of his career, a synthesis of all his mature, politically charged realism.
But just as he was reaching the absolute peak of his powers, his body finally gave out.
Yeah.
But in a bizarre twist of fate, after a lifetime of battling severe lung disease, it wasn't his lungs that killed him.
No, it was a sudden, massive brain hemorrhage.
The details from the sources are jarring in their suddenness. I mean, he's 44 years old. He's resting at home in Vailima. He's straining to open a bottle of wine.
Though some accounts curiously suggest he might have been vigorously making mayonnaise.
Right, making mayonnaise. And he suddenly stops. He looks at his wife, Fanny, asks, "Does my face look strange?" and collapses.
He was gone within hours.
It's like that.
The reaction of the Samoan people speaks volumes about the impact he had on them, not just as a famous author, but as a political ally.
What did they do?
They insisted on maintaining a watchguard over his body throughout the night. And the next day, they physically carried him on their shoulders, hacking a path through the jungle all the way to the top of Mount Via to bury him overlooking the sea.
They even translated his tombstone epitaph into a Samoan song of grief. It is a stunningly beautiful end to a chaotic life.
It really is. His literary legacy back in the West, however, was about to face a brutal demolition.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because when he died, he was a massive global celebrity, mourned everywhere.
But as the 20th century rolled around, the new literary establishment violently turned on him.
The snobbery is almost hard to believe. Figures like Virginia Woolf and her husband Leonard led the charge to downgrade him.
They relegated him to the status of a second-class writer, dismissing him as a mere children's author and a horror hack.
The gatekeepers of high literature essentially decided that because his work was intensely popular, readable, and focused on adventure rather than mundane psychological realism, it couldn't possibly be serious art.
Right. And the sources note the ultimate insult. He was totally excluded from the Norton Anthology of English Literature for decades.
From 1968 all the way to 2000. One of the most influential authors of the 19th century wasn't even taught in major universities.
And half of his original manuscripts were lost to history, likely auctioned off and scattered during the chaos of the First World War, because the academic world simply didn't value preserving him.
That is just heartbreaking. But it took until the late 20th century for a proper reevaluation to occur, didn't it?
It did. Modern scholars finally resurrected his reputation, looking past the pirate tropes. They recognized him as a peer of Joseph Conrad, a brilliant essayist, and a razor-sharp humanist critic of colonialism.
And despite the decades of academic snobbery, Stevenson outlasted his critics the only way that matters.
By continuing to be read and loved by millions.
Exactly. Today, he remains the 26th most translated author in the entire world.
Stepping back to look at the full scope of the sources today, we see an incredible trajectory. I mean, we started with a frail boy coughing in a damp Edinburgh house, his mind filled with Calvinist terrors.
And we watched him shatter his family's expectations, using his fragile body to cross the world for an impossible romance.
We saw him, confined to a bed and frothing blood, use his imagination as a pressure valve to completely redefine the adventure novel and explore the darkest divides of human psychology.
And finally, we tracked him to a tropical mountain where he stood not as a creator of fictions, but as a fierce, realistic defender of the Samoan people.
Stevenson's life leaves us with a really compelling thought about human potential. His journey forces us to consider how deeply our physical environments shape our moral and artistic identities.
Much like the dual nature of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Exactly. Stevenson proved that a single human life can contain absolute multitudes. He was the sickly invalid who became the swashbuckling adventurer, the conservative individualist who evolved into an anti-imperialist agitator.
It makes you wonder, if Stevenson hadn't been pushed to the very edges of physical survival by his own failing lungs, would he have ever needed to invent a character like Long John Silver?
If life had been comfortable, the pressure valve would never have opened.
Which leaves us with a fascinating question for you. Which unexpected side of yourself might emerge if, like Stevenson, you dared to leave your safe harbor and sail to the absolute edge of your own map?